We're in the middle of a new kind of arms race, but this one isn't being fought with missiles or submarines. No, it's being fought with the tiny materials inside your phone, your car, and, yeah, the world's most advanced weapons. Today, we're breaking down the global battle for critical minerals, a fight that is, quite literally, for the future itself.
So, ask yourself this: what really fuels the future? It's not just about oil and gas anymore. The answer is actually buried deep in the earth, in a handful of specific elements that have suddenly become just as strategic as any weapon system.
And this is the key idea. You need to think of these minerals as the gunpowder of the 21st century. Seriously, they aren't just commodities to be bought and sold. They are now instruments of national power, essential for both green energy and advanced military hardware. Whoever controls the supply, well, they hold an incredible amount of leverage over everyone else.
Okay, so let's dig in. What exactly are we talking about here? What makes these minerals so important, so critical, that nations are willing to risk global stability just to get their hands on them?
All right, let's get a clear definition on the table. According to a major report from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, that's SIPRI, critical minerals are materials that are essential for our economies. But, and this is the important part, their supply chains are fragile and super easy to disrupt. This covers everything from the lithium and cobalt in an EV battery to the rare earth elements inside a guided missile. They are the absolute bedrock of both the green transition and modern defense.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get a handle on this new gunpowder. Then, we're going to map out the global supply chain, trace the power shift that created this situation, and then check the numbers on the Global Power Index. Finally, we'll look at how these minerals are now being used as weapons and the huge dilemma this creates for our green future.
Now, to really get a handle on this competition, you've got to think like a strategist. You have to look at a map. The power in this new arms race comes from controlling very specific points on the globe. These choke points that can dictate the flow of materials from the moment they're pulled out of the ground all the way to the factory floor.
First up, let's talk about cobalt. This stuff is the absolute heart of the high-performance batteries in, well, pretty much everything. Our phones, our laptops, and especially our electric cars.
Okay, so if you look at the map of where cobalt comes from, you'll see the vulnerability immediately. The whole story, the journey of this mineral, starts in one single place. A staggering 76% of all raw cobalt on Earth is mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But the journey doesn't end there. That raw ore is then loaded onto ships and sent thousands of miles away to China, which completely dominates the refining process. This whole setup creates an incredibly fragile lifeline with two critical choke points. One country for mining, another for processing. A disruption in either of those spots could bring industries to a halt all around the world.
All right, next up, lithium. This is probably the one you've heard of, right? The rock star of the energy transition metals. It's the irreplaceable element at the heart of the electric vehicle revolution, and demand for it is just exploding.
So now let's trace the route for lithium. Australia and Chile are the world's biggest miners. But just like with cobalt, digging it out of the ground is only half the battle. That raw ore has to be processed into super high purity battery-grade chemicals. And that critical middle step is, you guessed it, once again dominated by China. You see the pattern here? It creates this massive strategic bottleneck. Western allied nations are pulling the raw stuff out of the ground, but they completely depend on a geopolitical competitor to actually make it usable. So the big question is, how did we get here? How did this incredible dependency just happen? Well, the thing is, it wasn't an accident at all. It was the result of 2 decades of completely different strategies being played by the world's major powers. Let's rewind the clock. If you look back at the 1990s, the US and other Western nations pretty much saw mining as a dirty, declining industry. The focus shifted to things like tech and financial services. But at the very same time, China was playing a completely different game, a much longer game. Their 2003 mineral policy was basically a blueprint for securing resources all over the world. Then, throughout the 2010s, their Belt and Road Initiative built the ports, rails, and relationships to dominate mineral processing. So fast forward to today, and the West is basically playing catch-up, launching huge initiatives like the Inflation Reduction Act to try and rebuild the very supply chains they let go of.
Okay, now it's time for what we're calling the Global Power Index. This is where we look at the hard data, the tail of the tape, if you will, to really see the scale of this imbalance. Who produces what and who depends on whom?
Let's start with rare earth elements. This is a group of 17 metals that are just essential for high tech. Everything from wind turbines to the precision guidance systems in missiles. And the numbers from the U.S. Geological Survey, they're just staggering. As you can see, the West has very limited capacity. China, on the other hand, controls 69% of the global mining and an even more dominant share of the incredibly complex refining process. Okay, how about gallium and germanium? You've probably never heard of them, but without them, you don't get high-end semiconductors, fiber optics, or military-grade infrared sensors. Here, the dependency isn't just big, it's pretty much total. The West is almost entirely reliant on imports. China controls an astounding 99% of all processed gallium and is the dominant force in germanium too. And the story just keeps repeating itself across a whole range of other critical industrial minerals. I mean, just look at this chart. It tells a powerful story. For antimony, which is used in flame retardants and military gear, China produces 60% of the world's total. For natural graphite, which is absolutely essential for EV battery anodes, that number jumps to 79%. And for magnesium metal, critical for making cars and planes lighter, it's a near total monopoly at 95%.
So this level of control, it's not just some interesting number on a spreadsheet. It's a weapon. And we are now entering an era where that weapon is actively being used, turning what used to be boring old trade policy into a front line for geopolitical conflict. What we're really witnessing here is a complete paradigm shift in how the world thinks about trade. You have the before picture, an era of free trade, where everyone believed that open markets and global supply chains would make us all more prosperous. But the after picture, where we are right now, is completely different. It's what Sipri calls the restriction era. It's all about resource nationalism, and this core belief that national security is economic security, which leads countries to use trade as a weapon.
And you don't have to guess what this new philosophy looks like in action. Just look at Indonesia and its massive nickel reserves. This quote from the Asia Sentinel really sums up their thinking. They basically said, hey, for way too long, others have gotten rich by taking our raw materials and processing them somewhere else. So they decided to change the rules of the game.
And this number right here, this is why that strategy is so powerful, so tempting for other countries. By banning the export of raw nickel ore, Indonesia forced companies to build their expensive smelters and processing plants right there, inside its borders. And the result? The value of its nickel exports shot up by over 1,300%, skyrocketing from about $2 billion to $30 billion. It's a powerful lesson in how a country can leverage its natural resources to climb up the value chain.
And make no mistake, this isn't some future theoretical conflict. The first shots in this mineral war have already been fired. In 2024, China slapped export licenses on gallium and germanium. By the end of that year, it had banned antimony exports to the United States altogether. The U.S. has fired back, announcing a future 25% tariff on Chinese graphite. The era of weaponized trade, it's already here.
So, all of this, it brings us to a really big, really uncomfortable question for leaders all over the globe. It's a problem that we're calling the green security dilemma.
And here's the central paradox at the heart of it all. To get to our clean energy future, to build all the solar panels, wind turbines, and electric cars we need to fight climate change, we have to massively ramp up mining and mineral processing. The problem? Those are some of the most environmentally damaging and carbon-intensive activities you can do. For instance, that Sipri report notes that processing just 1 ton of rare earth elements can create up to 2,000 tons of toxic waste.
And that leaves us right here with this one final critical question. This whole push for a green future has kind of accidentally created a brand new battlefield for global conflict, fought over the very materials we need for that transition. So, are clean energy and national security now mutually exclusive goals? Do we have to choose one over the other? That is the dilemma facing the entire world today.